Okay. So the third branch of knowledge, the third branch of philosophy, pardon me, is logic, right? As I said, we won't really go over it much in this course, if at all, in the case of the Intro to Ethics course. Um, it'll primarily be done through, you know, uh, analyzing arguments. So logic is the study of the principles used to distinguish between correct and incorrect reasoning. Right? Now that's the longest definition for any of the branches that we're going to have, and the reason for that is logic is all about precision. Right? It's all about narrowing down that domain of questions. Right? Uh, being as precise as possible, making arguments and your points, your focus as precise as possible. When you write a paper, you want it to be logically structured, right? And part of what that means is making sure that you're being uh, critical and precise, right? So, of course, the definition for logic is going to be the most critical and precise uh, because otherwise it's just kind of it would just be kind of a cruel irony to have a broad definition of what logic is. All right, the fourth branch is aesthetics. All right, and aesthetics is the study of beauty or art. Um, some of the central questions of aesthetics, and this is another one we won't spend a lot of time on. Um, some of the central questions of aesthetics include what is beautiful, what is ugly, is there a standard for beauty or art? Right? And that means not, is there a subjective standard, but is there some objective minimum that needs to be met? Some bar that needs to be a threshold that needs to be passed for something to be considered beautiful. So above this point, beautiful. Below this point, not. Right? Not necessarily ugly, but not beautiful. Right? It could just be plain. Right? And so these are again two important terms to keep in mind. Objective, meaning something is a matter of fact, and subjective, meaning something is a matter of opinion, right? It's personal, it's personal, as it were. Um, oh, I almost forgot something. So backtracking to epistemology, philosophers typically acknowledge two forms or two sources of knowledge. Right? These two sources are reason, which forms the basis of what's known as a priori knowledge. And a priori knowledge is knowledge just gained through reasoning and logic, right? It's knowledge that has no requirements of experience, right? You don't need to go out and see things in the world in order to come to this knowledge. It's purely rational. An example of this would be mathematics. Right? Uh, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 2 equals 4, therefore 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4. Right? Since 1 plus 1 is 2, and you can get to the same thing. And that's purely rational knowledge. The other one is experiential knowledge, or knowledge through experience. It's what's known as um, a posteriori, a posteriori, right? Posteriori, however you want to pronounce it. A posteriori, right? And this is knowledge acquired through experience. It's empirical knowledge, right? Things that you can measure and weigh, right? Like this bottle is full. It has water in it, and you can tell because, oh, I can hear the liquid, right? That kind of knowledge. All right, so last of the 5 traditional branches is ethics. Ethics is the study of morality, and its central questions include such fascinating topics as what is right or wrong, right? Um, or framed another way, what is good or bad? And framed once again another way, what is good or evil? It's important to note that these are distinct ways of framing the same question. And since they're distinct ways of framing the question, they lead you uh, towards different ways of thinking about the question. Right? Well, it's one of the things I hope you pick up from this course is the importance of how you frame your own thinking and how that might bias you towards a particular way of doing things or going about things. Uh, so when we say what is right or what is wrong, we're already beginning with this idea. If that becomes the framing for the question of morality, right? What is right or what is wrong? We've begun with this idea that morality is objective, right? That the action is what matters. The person committing it doesn't really have much bearing on whether or not the action itself is moral, right? If we begin with the question of what's good or what's bad, then we've already framed it in such a way that morality doesn't exist on, a binary circuit where it's either on or off, yes or no. Instead, we've put it on a gradient, right? Because with the idea of good and bad also comes better and worse, right? Yes, you can do something that's bad, right? But you might find yourself in a situation where it was the best thing you could do, right? We have, uh, what's the phrase? Uh, the best of bad options, right? Uh, the lesser of two evils, right? When you're in a situation where where there is no good choice, or at least none that's immediately makes itself aware to you, and you have to act on like the on which one's the lesser evil, right? Or the better of two bad options, right? You go with that one. Right? It's clear that you know that maybe it's not necessarily good, but it's still clearly better than whatever the other one is, right? Uh, Now, to frame it in this way of asking if it's good or bad is not to say that morality isn't objective, it's to acknowledge that it exists on a gradient, right? There could still be some minimum standard of what makes good action, right? Like truly good, morally good action versus just something that's good situationally, right? That lesser of two evils option. Uh, Continuing on, some other questions again follow this line. Is morality the same line as within aesthetics? Is morality subjective? Is it objective? Right? How should we act? Right? When, if at all, should we condemn others for their actions? Right? Because if certain actions are just bad overall, do we condemn people for doing bad actions when they're thrown into bad situations? I don't know, right? Ethics is probably one of the more interesting aspects of philosophy. Uh, it's easier to dig your teeth into uh, since it's a lot less abstract than some of the others. Okay, so we'll end this one here, and we'll continue moving on.